Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's mini lecture. This is a little bit different. We don't have a PowerPoint to go through where I'm going to give you some slides with some detailed information. Instead, I want to talk a little bit about evaluation, this thing that we are doing today. Because to me, evaluation is the very most challenging thing that we as scholars or as people ever have to engage in. We have to do it a lot in our world. It's not something that only comes up every once in a while. We evaluate every single day. This has been brought into stark relief by the pandemic and the way it's been dealt with here in Georgia. We have to make decisions about whether or not to wear a mask, about whether or not to go to the grocery store. If you work in any kind of service industry or education, you have to make evaluative choices about whether or not to confront somebody who's making a different choice with you, whether or not to say something, to speak up. All of those things require a complex mental process of evaluation. But let's step back a little bit and talk about the connection to theory. Because yes, we do evaluate every day, in and out, all day. But we don't usually do it with a very big system right at the front of our mind. Now, don't get me wrong, we have systems for thinking, right? We just went through ontology and axiology and epistemology and all those different dimensions of theory, and we have those in our life, right? So whether it's about whether or not you wear a mask or what classes you decide to take, or whether you decide to tell your friends that maybe they don't look as good in that outfit as really they thought they did. We have those theories in our head about what makes a good decision, and we have to evaluate based on those. But that still doesn't make it easy, because usually what we do is we rely on our snap judgments, our knee-jerk reactions, if you will. We rely on our gut instinct, or what society tells us is the right answer, or whatever's going to be most comfortable or least likely to cause conflict, there's a big one, or whatever somebody told us we were supposed to do. Right? But to actually stop and think through why I'm making this decision, why I'm evaluating this thing the way I am, and whether that actually reflects what I truly believe or something else, that's not a process that's usually right in the front of our minds. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to bring that process of evaluation to the forefront. Instead of relying on our snap judgments or our first go-to instinct, we are instead going to take a step back and say, what is the process that I personally use when I evaluate something? And this is something that those of you interested in education or those of you interested in politics and policy are going to come up against a lot in your lives, because you are going to be asked to evaluate on a very regular basis. Now, everybody else will too. But in those two professions especially, and I know some of you are interested in those professions, those two professions especially, evaluation is actually a thing that you are evaluated on, right? So one of the things that is a big part of my job, my very least favorite part of a big part of my job, is having to evaluate your work. I am required to submit grades at least twice every semester for every single one of you. And in order to do that, I have to have you turn in some kind of work, and then I have to have you get some sort of feedback that turns into a letter or number that supposedly reflects your learning in the class. Now, how many of you have ever felt that you earned a grade that was way too low for the work that you put into a class? That's okay, I know. And how many of you have ever thought, geez, I snuck by on that one, and you earned a grade that was way too high for the work that you put in on a particular assignment? Right? And what that demonstrates, we all know that that's happened. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. But what we all know that means is that evaluation is not a scientific process. As much as we, as your professors, as much as in education we are trying to make it a more fair, scientific, equitable, whatever process, we all know that it's not. It's a judgment process. And so I make my judgment criteria as clear as I can make them. I try to give you rubrics, and I try to give you assignment descriptions, and I try to help you and all. But when it comes right down to it, my job is to stand there and say, she did a good job. He did a good job. She really could have gotten in the way of that one. Ooh, they really didn't do as well on that as I thought. right? That's what I'm paid to do. And so one of the things that I have to do is come up with systems to actually evaluate. How do I know if what you're turning in is actually reflecting what you're learning? How do I know that my criteria are actually clear enough that you know what to learn? How do I know that you're learning? And so that, I think, puts that picture in perspective. What we're talking about here is based on judgment. It is always rooted in values. And there is a clear process that we often pretend not to see. And so we're going to work with those three things today: building our judgment, developing this process, and being able to understand the evaluative system. And so dive into this with me today, and I can't wait to see what kind of evaluative work you bring to the table. Thanks, everybody.